So we're talking about mitochondria tonight, and mitochondria are the little bitty guys in your cell, but they have a lot of big functions. They basically are a part of your cell that produces all the energy. But I'm going to go into all the other things they do. But they also help clean out the toxins. They also do all the communication that goes in and out of your cell. So they're a really, really, really important part of it. Without them, you wouldn't be alive, that's for sure. They are in every cell of your body except for adult red blood cells. So when baby red blood cells are being produced and they're growing, they have a mitochondria in it, but then they lose the nucleus, they lose the mitochondria out of it. That way they can carry more oxygen. So your baby red blood cells have them, and all of your other cells have them, but then after that, you lose them out of your red blood cells so they can do a different job. So that's what's important about it. The most mitochondria are in your muscles and in your brain. That's where most of the things happen in your body. Your brain's very active, your muscles are very active, and so those cells may have 50 to 100 mitochondria in them helping produce energy. There's some cells that only have one mitochondria, ones that don't need much energy. So the more active the cell, the more mitochondria it has. This is kind of an interesting thing about mitochondria. The best theory for mitochondria is the endosymbiosis theory. And what that means is that this cell was engulfed. It was a baby cell, maybe a little one that grew up in the muck, and it was engulfed by a big cell. And when it was engulfed by the big cell, they basically decided, hey, we work good together. You do your job, I do my job as a cell, and they stayed there. And basically, mitochondria have their very own DNA, different than your cell. So your cell has half from mom, half from dad. The mitochondria all comes from your mom, every bit of it. So mom gives you your mitochondria and actually gives you life. Without that mitochondria from mom, you wouldn't be alive. So whenever somebody says, well, they're half mine and half yours, you can always turn around as ladies and say, no, they're more mine than yours. And it's because you gave them the mitochondria. Mitochondria make energy. That's probably the one thing that's the most common that everybody knows about. It's an important thing, but it's not the only important thing they do. They make what's called ATP, and ATP is the kind of fuel that your cells and every process in your body uses to function properly. But mitochondria also control calcium. Calcium is used in a lot of things in your body. A lot of signaling goes on with calcium. Signals are sent with calcium, kind of like the Pony Express. It sends out and sends a message here, sends a message there, and that's how mitochondria signal, for the most part, are through calcium signals. The other important thing that mitochondria do is it tells the cell when to die. So mitochondria is managing the cell and says, hey, you've now started breaking down, you're no longer functioning correctly, and it puts out chemicals to start apoptosis, which means cell death is what it does. So it's very, very important. Without that process, you end up with things that go wrong in your body. You end up with cancers, you end up with chemicals that you shouldn't, and that kind of thing. So it's very important in basically putting the brakes on cancer.
How does that tie in?
Mitochondria help with the immune function. So not only do they send the calcium signals, they also send some signals that directly tell your body when you have an infection or when something is invading your body. So whether it be a parasite, a fungus, a bacteria, anything like that, the mitochondria are one of the first ones to recognize it and send out signals telling the rest of your body. They make hormones. So many of your hormones that are in your body, all the precursors and all of the things that help make that are influenced by mitochondria. So when you start seeing hormone issues, a lot of times we blow it off and say, well, you're getting older or you need this. Well, your mitochondria could be having a problem. They also are extremely, extremely, extremely important at cleaning up waste. And when we're talking about waste, we're talking about toxins, pesticides, heavy metals, junk food that you're eating, excess sugar, and that kind of thing. So they are definitely the cleanup crew. Talking about cleanup crew, mitochondria in general, I always think about, I grew up next to a town or city called Columbia, Missouri, where the University of Missouri is. And that was a very interesting town because they had their own power plant. They had their own electric grid. They had their own water system. They had their own waste plant. They had their own trash yard, junkyard, and that. And so basically, that little town was just like mitochondria. Mitochondria are doing all the things for that municipality, which is your cell. So if you think about your cell being the city, and that mitochondria being basically the municipality, all the services they offer, that mitochondria offers those services for you. So, what affects mitochondria? Mitochondria, one of the things that can affect them is your own DNA. You get half of it from mom, half of it from dad, but those influence how the mitochondria work. So, the mitochondria, even though they're in the cell, there's an environment around it, and that environment around it is influenced by your DNA. When we're looking at genes, there's a number of them that influence this. The MT genes influence it, and the POLG gene influence it. Some of these genes have to do with the way it makes energy. Some of it has to do with the way that it sends out signals, and some of them has to do with how it cleans up the waste. So when these genes are not operating right, or you get half of it bad from mom, half of it bad from dad, or you get both sides bad, you begin to have problems with mitochondria. Most individuals have one of these genes that's at least half broken. So it's not uncommon to say, yeah, you're not going to clean up stuff as well, or your signals aren't as good. You still survive, but you're not as good as somebody who had all the genes right. I don't think I've had anybody that I've looked at this and had perfect mitochondrial genes yet. So that's just interesting to know. So it's not a death sentence. It's not the end of the world, but it just means you have to be more careful when you're around pesticides and chemicals like that. If these genes aren't working right, you can be more tired. So you have individuals like, well, I don't know why she's tired. She isn't working like the rest of us. Well, her mitochondria may not be working. Weak muscles. So you have individuals and they just never been as strong as somebody else. Maybe you have a brother and sister and one's just always been weaker. Well, it's possible that maybe that one got the bad gene and so they're just not as strong. Or sometimes with muscles too, some of these mitochondrial genes, when you get older, they begin to break down. That gene all of a sudden flips on like a switch. If you've ever heard of epigenetics, all of a sudden you're doing fine. Maybe you got sick, maybe you didn't eat properly, and that gene flips on, and now you start getting atrophying. You lose your muscle mass is what happens. Brain and heart begin to have problems too with it. I think anybody that was here from my cardiovascular talk, there was a section there where I talked about mitochondria causing atherosclerosis and cholesterol issues and breaking down the heart. So it's extremely, extremely important in the heart. The heart may have more mitochondria per cell than any other part of the body because the heart is constantly beating. Even when you're resting, even when you're sleeping, it's working. So it takes a lot of energy. So when mitochondria don't work because of genes, they cause those kind of problems. Toxins. So toxins are probably the biggest issue nowadays. I think if anybody's heard me speak in the past, I've progressed over the last years. I'd even say the last 4 or 5 years. I had a time when I worked at a laboratory in Logan Chiropractic College. As I went through, I spent a little bit of time working in the laboratory and helping them run testing because my background is medical technology. And so when I was working there one day, I ran a group of tests for some students. So every student that comes in has to learn blood work. They have to learn how to draw blood. And so they drew blood. It comes to me. I was doing the blood work. Anyway, as I looked through it, all of a sudden here's this group of maybe 50 kids. 35 of them looked like they were dying. I mean, all of their chemistries were off. Everything looked like they'd been poisoned. So I was very concerned about them. And I go down to the classroom. I asked the professor, hey, can I speak to the class? He says, sure. And I said, okay, here's a list of 35 of you. What's going on? Are you drinking antifreeze? Are you eating poison? What's going on? Anyway, they were all doing a detox program is what they were doing. And that detox program is one from a company that a lot of places use. And they all looked like they were dying. They were all fatigued. They were all very sick. And I thought at that point, that's probably not a great thing to do a detox because it looks like these kids are going to die. And these were young, healthy people. I thought, what happens if it happens to someone like me? I was the old man in school at that time. I was the old guy. And so I kind of stepped back from detoxes and thought they're bad. Best way to detox is eat clean, eat healthy, and that kind of. I still believe that. But I think nowadays, with as many chemicals and pollutants that we're getting, we have to do something else. We have to step it up and start detoxing in different ways. And I think putting this presentation together has leaned me towards maybe doing detox the right way is going to be a good thing. Now, I've said all that. Toxins are actually a big deal, a great big deal. I'm leaning more towards seeing how after COVID, post-COVID, they start allowing more stuff in our food. We're getting more toxins now. And so you have people saying, I have post-COVID, I have post-COVID. The truth is they have post-COVID mitochondrial toxicity is probably what's going on. And there's a lot of people jumping on that bandwagon, and with probably rightfully so. They're doing everything they used to do. They're cleaning up the diets, they're helping the gut, they're helping the brain, they're helping the blood flow, and people are still having problems. And this is probably why. So the pollutants, bad chemicals, can damage mitochondria. And one of the reasons it damages mitochondria is because mitochondria's job is to clean up the chemicals, send out signals, and make energy. If it is spending all of its time cleaning up bad chemicals, it can't make energy and it can't send signals. So we start having hormone problems. We start having cell death when we shouldn't, that kind of thing. Air pollution is a big one from cars, factories, smoke. I should have put more farm type things on here too, but I come into pesticides there. Herbicides are a big deal. Heavy metals. Mercury is probably one of the biggest ones that we have found. A number of patients, when we've done what's called an FMV test, that they've had mercury way off the chart. And so if you want to mess up brain, if you want to mess up neurological stuff, throw mercury in. It's one of the fastest ways to cause some major problems there. One of our patients that had mercury problems, she was eating fish every day, and her mercury was at like 36. So anything above a 5 is considered very high. She was at 36, and that's why. The other big concern right now with heavy metals is aluminum. So a lot of aircraft, they've added aluminum to the aircraft fuel. And when they did that, it's so they get better gas mileage, they get better mileage out of it. But the problem is aluminum also changes the environment. It tends to be that moisture sticks to it. So in flight patterns, you're going to have more moisture there, more airline things. But that is falling on our crop fields. It's falling on us. It's falling in our water. And so right now, more people are getting a lot more aluminum, which definitely damages mitochondria. Mold and toxins. I will say this. This is not nearly the problem here as it was in Missouri. Missouri is extremely humid. There they have the molds that grow down in Louisiana, the ones that grow in Michigan, and then we have people moving in from India and places like that to work at Monsanto, and they had all kinds of molds. When I would test it, there was molds that weren't supposed to be there. The thing is, we're drier out here, so for the most part, we don't have nearly the mold toxicity, but a lot of people haven't lived here all their life, and so if you've had mold toxicity at one point, you still have it. If you've had a spouse or you have been in the military, likely you're going to have mold issues. Yes.
How do you test for it?
It can be tested in a house. There's trays you put out and test for it that way. And for yourself, there's toxicity, mold toxicity, or mycotox panels you can do. They're not very cheap, but if it is your problem, it goes a long way towards cleaning those up and getting rid of them. A lot of times we will treat individuals for yeast and molds and things, and they clean it up themselves if everything's going good. If we get to a point that we're cleaning somebody up for yeast and molds and they're not getting better, sometimes we have to use different things like a homeopathic that's called mycotox that comes in and cleans that out. So that's something we do. I used to use that later in the stage. I'm beginning to use it earlier in the stage now than what I used to. Antibiotics, a number of them, gentamicin is one in particular that damages mitochondria. So individuals, they don't use it as much as they used to, but gentamicin, they used to use it a lot for staph infections and trying to figure out how to get rid of staph infections. And then those people would have that infection, they would get it cleaned up and gone, and they'd have energy problems the rest of their life. And so that was a major issue. Chemotherapy drugs. For the most part, the mitochondria try to come in and clean out the toxins from it, and the mitochondria suffer greatly. So a lot of times, if we have chemotherapy drugs and you make it past the cancer, doing some chelations, doing some things, testing for heavy metals and things like that, pulls it out so that you can recover from that better than what you would otherwise. Because there's individuals that have had chemotherapy and they end up with brain fog and neuropathies, things like that, and you say, well, that's just the chemotherapy, that's the way it's going to be. It's because the mitochondria have either been damaged or they're holding so much toxin that they're struggling with it. Just because that cell has the chemotherapy in it, well, when it dies, all that goes back out into the bloodstream. So every time it just keeps getting recycled, then the next mitochondria tries to clean it up, and then it dies. Then the next one does. Over time, if you live long enough, some of it gets out of you, and you keep getting better and better and better and better. for a long time you struggle to clean it up. So using binders and things is a way to try to help clean that up. The big one here that I think was interesting when I was doing this was painkillers. Acetaminophen, which is Tylenol, ibuprofen, those at normal dose are not necessarily a problem, but a lot of times if you even take them at normal dose and you're adding other things to it, you begin to have a problem there. Especially acetaminophen, if you're taking it and you happen to be doing alcohol with it at the same time, you can wipe out a lot of mitochondria and a lot of brain cells too, and a lot of liver problems. So painkillers, if you're just taking it because you're hurting all the time, we probably need to figure out something else to do for you. Lifestyle choices that affect the mitochondria. Not exercising is a great big one. The one thing that helps you make more mitochondria is using your body. So if you sit in a chair, your body, your number of mitochondria go down. Every time the cell divides, if today your cell has 10 mitochondria and you get up and you're active, and when it splits off, makes a new cell, you may have 12, 15, 20 new mitochondria, depending on how much activity you had. If you sit all day long, when it divides, next time it may only have 5, and then 4, and then 3, and 2, and 1, because it says, hey, you don't need the energy. I'm not going to waste my time making it. So basically, exercising helps do that. Probably everybody knows somebody, especially in younger life, in their 20s to 40s to 50s, who wasn't feeling good, always sick and everything, and somehow they got a wild hair that they're going to start working out, and all of a sudden their life changed and they felt good. That's most likely what happened. They started exercising, they started making more mitochondria, and maybe they had yucky mitochondria, and now they're getting fresh and new and more, and all of a sudden they're doing good. Bad diet. This is a big, big, big one too. What you put in your body definitely affects the mitochondria. Anybody that was here for my seed oil one knows that seed oils are a big, big, big deal on mitochondria. So when we look at 60s, 70s, 80s, how little seed oil we had to now in the 2020s, it's a problem. And we know people don't have the energy that they had, and what they could do. And some of us say, well, we're just getting older, but it's even the young kids don't have the energy that the rest of them did. So the food that you're putting in is a big deal. Poor sleep. Mitochondria have to change what they're doing. So during the day, you're up, you're active, they're making a lot of energy, they're keeping you going. They have to have a time to rest to clean up. They have to clean up all the debris and they have to clean up everything. If you don't get good sleep, you're not cleaning out the debris. And then stress. Stress makes a couple interesting chemicals, but cortisol is the big one that we know. But cortisol makes what's called reactive oxidative species, which is rust inside these mitochondria. So when it gets to these, mitochondria pulls it in, it's sending signals to speed everything up. It can't clean out the waste fast enough. And so that's an interesting one that happens there. That's basically those. So another big thing that affects mitochondria is nutrient deficiencies and excesses. So a lot of times individuals come in here and I do find nutrient deficiencies and I say, hey, you need this and this and this. But many times people come in and I will say, you are taking way too much of this. I had a patient in here this week that was taking 50,000% more B12 than what they should have had. So 50,000% more. And they said, well, isn't more better? No, not necessarily. So we have to be careful of how much we put in. Deficiencies in particular that people have are the B vitamins. B vitamins, especially if you have gut problems, are harder to absorb. You have to have good gut to do it. A lot of our B vitamins will come from green leafy vegetables and also meat. So those happen to be the two hardest things to digest if you have a gut problem. You'll have green leafy stuff go through your digestive tract. Meat doesn't get digested well. So if we're seeing those problems, we got to look at digestion. But if you have those problems, you're going to have mitochondrial issues. The mitochondria use these for energy production, but also they use it to repair DNA and they use it to detox. So all that is called methylation. If it's too low, you're going to have energy problems. You're going to have poor detoxing. You're going to have brain fog. You're going to have fatigue. So that kind of sounds a lot like post-COVID situations that people are having right there. CoQ10. CoQ10 is a compound that we make naturally in our bodies. Our peak of making it is usually by 20 years old. We make the most we're ever going to make. And by the time you get to be 70, you're almost making zero. If anybody was here for my cholesterol class, you know that cholesterol is up here And one of the products of cholesterol is CoQ10. So if you're on a statin drug or your cholesterol is too low, some individuals in the medical world doesn't acknowledge that your cholesterol can be too low, but you can have hypocholesterolemia, which means your cholesterol is too low. You don't make enough CoQ10. CoQ10 is extremely, extremely important to the mitochondria. And I don't know of anybody who probably wouldn't benefit from taking CoQ10, truthfully. Because like I said, if you're making it at your peak at 20, by the time you're 50, you're pretty low. By the time you're 70, almost none. If you made it over 70, you probably need it, and it would do good. CoQ10, ubiquinone is the one you want. A lot of companies sell CoQ10 that is not ubiquinone, and so therefore it's not very usable for you. You have to do a lot of processing to make it work. So that's important. Deficiencies, low energy, muscle weakness, and heart problems. They give it to you, to help out your heart and that kind of stuff, but they also give you statin drugs to lower the cholesterol, which lowers CoQ10. So if you're ever on a statin drug, take CoQ10. Magnesium. Magnesium is the important part inside of the mitochondria. Is magnesium basically helps clean up stuff, and it also helps other reactions go. So it's kind of the helping hand that really helps out in there. If you don't have enough magnesium, it makes a big difference. You also need magnesium that is absorbable. So tonight I was working on a patient in there, and they were taking a magnesium oxide because it's cheap, is why you take it. Magnesium oxide, only less than 4% of what you take of magnesium oxide actually gets out of the digestive tract into the bloodstream. So it'll help you poop good, but it's not going to help your mitochondria out. Yes, ma'am?
How many different types of magnesium are there?
At least 7. So at least 7 different kinds. And about 5 or 6 of them are made to basically help you clear your bowels. They're actually chalk is what they are, and you can't digest them. The other ones play different roles in the way they help with either neurological things, or they help relax muscles, or in the methylation process. So depending on what your symptoms are is what you need. And once you can get some of those into the bloodstream, they can kind of go and do their own thing. The problem is most people are taking cheap ones that never get into the bloodstream. So good question. The next one is iron. So iron is an interesting one for mitochondria. We have to have iron to make energy in our body, to make it work, to make insulin, to do a lot of things that mitochondria function in to work that way. When you have a deficiency, you're fatigued. Anybody that's had iron deficiency knows you run out of energy, and this is one of the reasons why you don't carry oxygen. Mitochondria have to have oxygen to produce energy, but also those processes take iron inside the mitochondria. But if you get too much iron, you get what's called oxidative stress, which means rusting. You get rust inside there, and basically they don't work. It'd be just like you having rust inside your motor. It starts grinding, it starts having problems. Mitochondria get rusty. L-carnitine. Basically, L-carnitine helps move fat into the mitochondria. And the important thing about this is mitochondria usually use 2 fuel sources. They use ketones, which are made from fat, breakdown of fats, and they use sugar. The catch is, if anybody's listened to my other talks, they prefer to use ketones. Ketone is very clean. So if you have a power plant and you have one that's burning natural gas and one that's burning coal, the one that burns natural gas usually lasts longer. It doesn't start rusting inside. It doesn't wear out as fast. The coal burning plant tends to get suet built up in the exhaust and they have to come in and scrub it out, clean it up. Natural gas lasts a lot longer and actually produces a little better energy from it. When we're talking about the mitochondria prefer the ketones and the fats because it burns clean, it burns nice for it. When you throw in sugar on top of it, it burns it, but you get a lot of suet, you get a lot of leftover chemicals, you get a lot of rust in it. So people that are diabetics are leaning towards burning up all the sugar first and not the fat. And so that's what happens with them. So their mitochondria take a hit. L-carnitine helps move the fats in it so it can burn it preferentially. Deficiencies, you have poor fat metabolism, so you tend to get heavier, you tend to weigh more, you tend to get fatigued. The alpha lipoic acid, this is an antioxidant. So this is what helps clean the rust out of that mitochondria. And so alpha lipoic acid is an important one to have in there. Without it, you have more rust, the mitochondria doesn't work as good, and it leads to downstream issues. So now excesses that harm the mitochondria. I mentioned iron overload. Basically, it causes more oxidative stress or rust in there. Sugar and glucose. There's no doubt that when you're pouring sugar on that mitochondria, there's going to be problems. You're going to have heart problems. You're going to have muscle problems. You're going to have nerve problems. There's a lot of things coming when you pour too much sugar into that mitochondria. And then omega-6 seed oils. Anybody that came to my seed oil presentation knows that seed oils are going to cause a problem with this. Part of the reason we start having atherosclerosis is the way seed oils interact with mitochondria. They take down nitric oxide. Cholesterol begins to stick inside your arteries. So seed oils actually caused atherosclerosis. For how many decades now have they told us, oh, seed oil, go to canola oil, go to corn oil, stop using the lard, stop using the tallow, and go to this. And now there's a lot of evidence that shows that's why we're having so much more atherosclerosis than we used to. You know, Bridger, when he was out here, they would eat meat almost 97% of the time. They would hardly have any vegetables. They talked about the plums up here on the Clark River, Clark's Fork River. They talked about some fruits and stuff they ate, but almost meat 100% of their things. And he ended up moving back to Missouri, becoming a senator and everything, and died of pneumonia as an old age. You know, so it's one of those things. If anybody was going to have a problem with meats and tallows and that kind of stuff, those guys would have. But they're also moving every day. So
I never liked the taste of seed oils.
yeah, they have a different taste to it. They've been bleached and everything else. So what is mitochondrial dysfunction? This is kind of a term that's being thrown out there a lot. And it basically means that they're not working right. They're not producing enough energy. They're not doing the signals. They're not basically cleaning out the debris. So they stop cleaning out the waste. They stop producing energy. All those things that I just talked about. And they're going to struggle as a whole cell functioning capabilities. So even one mitochondria in the cell can throw a monkey wrench into the whole thing. So what are the things that cause this dysfunction? It's kind of just reverse of what I said, helped it along the long way. So your genes can be a problem. A lot of times we know that the gene is a problem either when you're young or in your early 20s, 30s, you'll start knowing, hey, something's the matter here. But there's the opposite end of it. When you get older and it's epigenetic, you've put enough chemicals in your body, you put enough toxins in your body, you've been sick enough times, all of a sudden those genes turn on and you start having problems then. A big one is illnesses. So COVID is the one I've mentioned a lot tonight, but bacterial infections, viral infections, fungal infections, parasitic infections, all of these things are playing a role in it. There's some other interesting things in infections that are not mentioned much. There's a thing called a prion, and a lot of individuals think a prion is maybe what causes Lyme disease. It almost is like a virus, but it's just a little clump of protein that when it goes along, it gets pulled into your cell and causes your cell to get sick. And that really causes a lot of problems with mitochondrial function. So people that have Lyme disease, a couple things like that, will have major issues with this. Aging. As we get older, just like every cell in your body, your mitochondria divide and make a new mitochondria, divide and make a new mitochondria. If you do it enough times, you're going to have a problem. My parents had a pottery factory when I was a kid, and they would try to get as many pores out of a mold as you could. But every time you pour a mold, it just takes a little bit out of the mold, a little bit out of the mold. And so maybe you make 1,000 pots. By the time you get out to the 1,000 or 2,000 pot, it doesn't look like the first one. It's a little bigger. It's just a little misshapen. Well, our mitochondria, every time they multiply, each one is just a little different, and that happens with age. And then chemical toxins. Cigarette smoke has been the biggest one we've talked about for decades now, but all of your toxins we're putting in, and now so many of them are hidden in our food that we're getting. In the United States, especially after COVID, they actually let a lot more chemicals in during COVID time period, and that's because they were worried about food being able to store on the shelves. So they made it possible in the United States that chemicals that are not used in the rest of the world are used here in our food to store them longer. There's a thing called one-dose toxicity, and that's what the FDA goes by. If one dose of chemical in that food doesn't make you sick, it's considered safe. So they can put almost anything they want to in that food, and the catch is almost nobody eats one dose here in the United States. So if you go to get potato chips, if it says 8 chips is 1 serving, that's the legal dose. They can stay under that. But if you get 2 doses or 2 servings, so you get 16 potato chips, Now you can be over that, and no one cares. And they don't say, hey, 8 is the serving size, but 20 may make you sick. They don't put that on the bag. And so that's a real thing. I often talk about this too with chemicals in eating and the one-dose toxicity. We sold a house one time to a guy who was an engineer for a bakery. And we sold it to him in March, I think it was, or some time period like that. And he's making hot dog buns, and he's really busy making hot dog buns and hamburger buns and stuff. Couldn't come to the closing. And I said, what are you doing this for? Is it Mother's Day, or what are we doing this for? He goes, oh no, 4th of July. And I said, it's March. You're making 4th of July? He goes, yeah, we put them out in the truck, we fumigate the truck, and nothing's going to touch them, nothing's going to eat it, you know. And I thought, you're making hamburger buns and hot dog buns now for 4th of July, and they're going to last that way. To take the opposite of that, I've been to Europe and Netherlands, at the Mother Goose Hotel in the Netherlands, and come out of there, and there's a bakery next door. And the lady's out there taking the bread, and she's throwing it out for the pigeons. And I go up to her, and I said, oh, how old is the bread? Is it a week old, or how old is it? She goes, oh, no, we made it yesterday. So their bread there, they put no preservatives in it, and basically they make it fresh every single day. So it's a big difference between our bread and their bread.
It's the best bread you'll ever eat.
It was good.
Oh, God.
So now, what kind of health problems do we have when mitochondria aren't functioning correctly? The number one is fatigue. So nowadays, I think I don't ever remember really fatigue ever being mentioned as a kid. Maybe I was sheltered and everything, but my parents owned a number of businesses in town. We were in Boonville, kind of like Cody, owned a number of businesses. My parents would get up early, like 5 o'clock in the morning, and a lot of times didn't come home until 10 o'clock at night. I don't think there was ever a time I heard the word fatigue. I could say, yeah, I'm tired or something like that, but never fatigue. Now, we hear it all the time. It's a common thing, and even I've said, yeah, I'm fatigued, I'm tired. So it plays a role in it, and mitochondria are probably the reason why. Weakened immune system. So we have a lot of individuals that are sick all the time, or feel sick, or just can't be healthy. And basically, whenever we have mitochondria dysfunction, our immune system doesn't function correctly. Our white blood cells take a lot of energy. White blood cells actually have a lot of processes they do. They have to squeeze between other cells. They come in, they investigate. I mean, they do a lot of things that's important. They put out a lot of chemicals, and a lot of those chemicals actually come from the mitochondria inside that white blood cell that help us heal. So when mitochondria is not working right, they don't have the energy, they can't signal, they can't fight off anything. They also break down chemicals inside the cell that help our immune system function better. So when they get rid of that ROS, when they get rid of the rust out of there, they help those cells stay strong and function better. When you can't get rid of the rust and the chemicals out of the white blood cells, they begin to deteriorate, and so your immune system goes down. And then they control inflammation. Some of the signals done with calcium and other chemicals coming out of there tell inflammation to start and tell inflammation to stop. I've talked about in several of these lectures before that acute inflammation is usually that first week to 4 weeks to 6 weeks in there. It's called acute inflammation. Acute inflammation is good inflammation. It's what heals your body. It says, hey, you're sick here. Let me send the chemicals in to clean this up. It says, oh, you just sprained your ankle. Let's come in here. Let's come in here and clean out the debris. Let's heal up the tissues in here. But once you get out past, especially 8 weeks, it's chronic inflammation. The healing should have been done by now. And so now it's still tearing up everything. It's still sending chemicals in there, and it's not healing. The thing that controls you going from acute to chronic, or stopping you from going from acute to chronic, is the signals that come out of mitochondria. So it's extremely important that mitochondria is functioning correctly to take care of inflammation. The next thing is, and this is a big one, this is probably where most people notice mitochondrial dysfunction. We have a number of people here in this area that have some of the genes that don't work right for the mitochondria, specifically in muscle. I'm one of those people. I've done well in my life. I've been a 3-time All-American, but as I get older, I'm not recovering very well from workouts. So I did my genetic workup. I came back to find out that my mitochondrial genes don't work right, and they need a lot of ribose to take care of it. I started taking ribose, and it changed my world, and that was what my mitochondria needed. So it's kind of an interesting thing. But your muscle cells, including your heart, take a ton of energy to make them work properly, and so therefore they need a lot of mitochondria, and those mitochondria have to be functioning correctly. When they're not functioning correctly, you don't have the energy for them. You get pain and cramping in them. That cramping, again, when we go back to CoQ10, that mitochondria needs that CoQ10 to function properly. When you don't have it, mitochondria don't work, you start having cramps. So a lot of people take CoQ10 and it takes care of that. You get poor muscle recovery, and that's what I was talking about for myself. I just didn't recover like I should. And then a lot of individuals will actually start having muscle wasting is what they'll have. So they work out, they do everything they should, and their muscles just start atrophying. And a lot of times this gets worse with age. As your mitochondria start not replicating, not doing what they should be, or they get toxins in them, you begin to get less muscle mass and it gets harder to do anything. The next one is neurological issues. So every one of your neurons or your cells in your nervous system have mitochondria that help give them the energy. And if you know anything about the nervous system, basically the energy that goes through it is kind of just like when you plug in something in the wall, there's an alternating current that goes through that. Same thing happens with inside your nervous cells, your neurons. And mitochondria make that signal go through there. So individuals that start having problems with mitochondria start having neuropathy. The classic one of this is diabetic neuropathies. You start putting in a bunch of sugar in there, and especially, let's say, feet. When you put in sugar, you put chemicals in, a lot of them settle out to the lowest places. So all of a sudden, you get too much sugar in there. The mitochondria in your nerve cells don't get enough. They get too much sugar, not enough fats in them. It starts making waste, and those nerves stop working correctly. You have individuals, too, that are diabetics, and they always sleep on the same side every night when they sleep. Interesting enough, that falls out to that same side every night when they sleep, and they may have neuropathy in their left hand, and in their left foot's really bad, and in their right foot a little bit. And you'll say, okay, are you sleeping on your left side all the time? They're like, yeah. So that's why you're having more neuropathy on that side. And so let's get your sugar cut back. Let's get these mitochondria working better. So it also has to do with ATP energy in those neurons. A lot of neurons need ATP to make the neurotransmitters and to make those signal chemicals that they use. And so without it, you can't make the neurotransmitters. So you have anxiety, you have depression, trouble concentrating in that. So the next one is heart disease. Probably a third of my lecture on the cardiovascular system probably had to do with talking about mitochondria and the way this works. But in heart disease, you have your mitochondria. They actually help make nitric oxide, which opens up blood vessels. They also help make the walls of the blood vessels the right penetrating, so blood vessel cells can come in and out at the right rate. And so whenever you begin to have a problem with mitochondria, you stop making nitric oxide, your blood vessels get harder, they get stiffer, so you start having higher blood pressure. They also make it where you start getting rust or oxide in the layers of your blood vessels. When you start getting oxide or rust inside the layers of it, the next thing your body does is says, okay, we need to heal this. It sends cholesterol there to actually heal the problem. Cholesterol begins to stick inside the blood vessels because your mitochondria are no longer producing nitric oxide and they're not cleaning out rust. So the medical world would say, oh, your problem is you have too much cholesterol. Well, the truth is you probably have too many toxins and too many problems in your mitochondria, and you stopped moving. So you stop producing as many mitochondria, you start putting in more sugar, you started not sleeping as well. So now your mitochondria are not functioning, they're not producing nitric oxide, they're producing more rust. This builds up in the walls of the blood vessel. Your body says, okay, we need to heal this blood vessel. What do they heal it with? They heal your blood vessels with cholesterol. So it sends more cholesterol to it to heal it up, and actually sends LDL cholesterol to it, the one they say is a bad cholesterol, and it tries to heal it. Well, it builds up because it's trying to make a protective coating so you don't bust a hole in the side of your blood vessel. And then you end up with heart attacks and problems like that when it actually began at the mitochondria. So I'd say on there, cholesterol balance is important based on this. It builds up in there, causing atherosclerosis, clogging the arteries and that. So extremely important. If you back up now and you take young kids that are already starting to get atherosclerosis now, by the time they're 20 and 30, we didn't have that when I was a kid. People didn't have cholesterol building up. It wasn't a problem. Well, we're feeding them oils that don't belong there. It's causing rust. They're not getting the activity like they did before. They're busy on their cell phones and they're busy on their pads, playing on their computers and stuff. And so that's why we're having heart problems in young kids nowadays, because these mitochondria are not functioning correctly. Diabetes. I've kind of talked about this in a roundabout way, but mitochondria tend to overprocess sugar, tend to make a lot more rust, And then we start having more blood sugar problems. Mitochondria are used by the beta cells in the pancreas to make more insulin. Well, when they start having problems, you start making less insulin. Whenever you start having signaling problems, you start getting insulin resistance. So the insulin you did make doesn't work as well. So your blood sugar goes up, you have more mitochondrial issues. And so basically, blood sugar is basically a snowball rolling downhill. It starts out as a little problem, mitochondria start having a problem, then you have a bigger problem, bigger problem, bigger problem, and it just keeps going. I can't tell you how many individuals I see in this clinic, particularly, I don't know why it's in this area so much, that come in that are diabetics. Their blood sugar may be running 150. I like to see it below, like right at 100 or below is where I like to see it. They're coming in at 150, and they'll say, I'll look at their medication list, and they're taking maybe 2, 3, 4 medications for diabetes. And I'll say, oh, so you're a diabetic? They'll, no, I'm not a diabetic. I'll say, well, you definitely are. Your blood sugar is at 150 right now, and you're definitely a diabetic. No, I'm taking medications for that. I'm no longer a diabetic. That's not a true statement. And I've actually probably the meanest I've gotten to people in the office is when they tell me they're not a diabetic and they're on medications and their blood sugar is still high. So because it's a snowball going downhill. Digestive issues. This is probably what we're dealing with the most, and I'm probably dealing with this myself. So I'm preaching to the choir here on this one here. Mitochondrial issues. There are a ton of mitochondria in your gut. It's probably third or fourth most of the place for mitochondria because you have muscles in there along the intestines. There's a lot of signaling going on telling you if you're hungry, you're full, making a lot of hormones and things like that. So when mitochondria are not working in the digestive tract, a lot of times we're going to have bloating, we're going to have gas because we're not moving stuff along at the right pace. Our digestive tract, it has this perfect timing that it moves things along. So this bacteria can do its job, this bacteria can do its job. It squeezes it, changes the pH as you go through. And so when you start having mitochondrial problems, you start having problems with gas and bloating. You start having poor nutrition. Food particles are broken down in the digestive tract, have to be moved to the bloodstream, and it takes energy to do that. So mitochondria are important. That's also why as we get older, we don't produce as much stomach acid. We don't produce as much digestive enzymes, so we can't digest as good. But also the mitochondria aren't there to move stuff through as good and to pull it into the bloodstream. So mitochondria are probably the reason we're aging in our digestive tract and having malnutrition as we get older. Food sensitivities. So the signaling, we talked about the immune system and the signaling between cells helped out by mitochondria. The mitochondria kind of tell us, hey, this is something good, this is something bad. We start having problems with mitochondria, we start having autoimmune diseases, we start having oversensitivity to things. So we get all of our food sensitivities, maybe because leaky gut, things are passing through, but also because the mitochondria are not signaling correctly. And then, as I said, we slow down digestion. So very, very important for digestion. And this is something I'm working through more and getting more protocols to help people out with this. So we can get rid of some of the food sensitivities that we're, or at least not get more of them. Hormone dysfunction. So mitochondria help make the steroid hormones, estrogen, progesterone, testosterone, cortisol, and pregnenolone, which is a precursor to those. It has to be functioning to make these. So we have a lot of young people now that are infertile. We have a lot of people that are having menopause in their early. I mean, we're talking about people like at 40 years old are like, I think I'm in menopause. You know, I'm having night sweats, I'm having all that stuff. It's because they're having this. The interesting thing about this, a lot of salon type medical spas and things just say, well, come in, we'll take care of you. We'll give you the hormones. The problem is when you start giving too much hormones and your mitochondria aren't working right, this starts signaling bad signals. So then we start producing cancers. We start having other issues down the way. So if we can take care of some of the toxification issues, we can take care of some of the underlying issues, you shouldn't need the hormones. I'm going to say this too. Menopause is there for a reason. So all of your hormones are meant to speed up things, to make things faster, to move things along. As you get older, you don't have functions like you had when you were younger. Basically, your hormones don't function the same way, your mitochondria don't function the same way. So when you pull out those hormones, it actually puts less burden on the mitochondria. It puts less burden on different parts of your body. You start throwing in hormones too fast, you're still accelerating everything. So you're causing more debris, you're causing debris for the mitochondria, you're causing debris that causes cancers and things like that. There's always been debate, hey, do taking these hormones cause cancer? you'll see about every decade they switch that study back and forth, and the studies are kind of skewed. But I think if they would take and look more at the mitochondria and what's going on when you're giving these hormones, they'd find out real quick it's not necessarily helping people. There are times when people need hormones. Their body is broken, it can't make them. There's times when, yes, menopause is too bad for somebody to handle, they need them. But in general, we're probably pushing it too much out there. When we can help mitochondria, we can help nutrition, do things that would take care of it in another way. Thyroid function. So mitochondria they're what takes T4 and makes it into T3. T4 is the thyroid that your thyroid makes, and it's a thyroglobulin of 4-iodine. It floats around your body. It's not functioning. It doesn't work. It's just there as a transport. As soon as it gets into the cell, the mitochondria pulls off one of the iodine. Now it makes it a functioning, basically T3. That can now speed up your metabolism. It makes the cell go faster. It sends signal to the next cell next to it to go faster. But if mitochondria are not working right, that basically conversion from T4 to T3 will be stunted, and the whole thyroid cycle will be off when that mitochondria is not functioning right. So you get fatigue, you get weight gain, cold intolerance, poor thyroid performance. Cortisol. So cortisol is an interesting one. Mitochondria basically keep you from almost exploding when you have too much cortisol. So when you're under stress and everything, you're basically producing a lot of adrenals, a lot of cortisol, and it speeds you up, speeds you up, speeds you up, speeds you up. Well, you would go like crazy all day long, but the mitochondria say, okay, enough is enough, enough is enough, and it starts breaking down cortisol. So it helps manage cortisol levels. The problem is cortisol is pretty toxic to the mitochondria. The breakdown of it, when it breaks down cortisol, it makes the mitochondria sick inside and often kills them and makes it so it doesn't work right. So when you can see, if you have too much stress and that cortisol goes up, it's trying to clean up, and now you're killing the mitochondria, you just see the snowball effect that goes downhill with that. Also, it helps make cortisol, it helps regulate cortisol too, so it's what helps make it too. So if it's not working, some people go into fatigue, adrenal fatigue, where they're not making enough cortisol. If the mitochondria are toxic, you can't make it either. So it goes both sides of that spectrum. Insulin and blood sugar. We covered this pretty hard so far, but basically insulin in particular is what your body uses to process glucose, and it's made in the pancreas, but the mitochondria help send signals to tell you what to do with the insulin. So we've heard of insulin resistance. Insulin resistance takes several forms. Part of it can be that the receptor sites for insulin on the cells have began to break down and not work correctly. That's usually when you have too high a sugar for too long, but also when you just don't produce insulin, you can start to become insulin resistant, insulin deficient, insulin resistant, and that can be a mitochondrial problem in the beta cells. And then your sex hormones, again, we kind of covered that with your estrogen, progesterone, and all those. When it's not working correctly, you're going to have low libido, irregular cycles, infertility. Probably a very, very, very large chunk of the erectile dysfunction issues out there are basically probably a mitochondrial issue. They've built up with toxins, stress, they're not sleeping and everything. And I mentioned that mitochondria make nitric oxide. Nitric oxide is what basically dilates blood vessels. And when we talk about erectile dysfunction, nitric oxide is the big one. So when we're talking about all the medications out there now for ED and that, a lot of them work by making the receptor sites for nitric oxide more receptive would be the word I'd use, more receptive, so that nitric oxide can land up, because they have less nitric oxide than they had before. So if you cleaned up the mitochondrial issues, we wouldn't have young guys out there with erectile dysfunction issues and things like that. Same thing with women. You have an erectile dysfunction too with the clitoris, and if you're not getting blood flow to it, it's the same thing. You notice it with a guy. A lady would have to tell you and feel different. Yeah, I'm not the same as I used to be. It's the same situation. Inherited disorders. So these are particular ones that are pretty significant in little kids. So some of them cause problems with like stroke and seizure type things. Some of them cause optic neuropathies where your eyes don't work right. A lot of them will cause motor problems. A lot of them will cause seizures. And so those are just common inherited disorders. So you may have a gene or several genes that would cause these issues with mitochondria that usually you'll know these in a younger time period. Some of them, if you have the genes, but they're recessive or not as strong as other ones, you might see them in older years. You'll start seeing, hey, I'm having some vision problems. I'm having some night vision issues. I have some weak muscles, but these are common ones. I wanted to put them up there just so somebody had them for reference. I didn't really plan on covering them all the way. How can we keep our mitochondria healthy? The number one thing you can do is eating, and that's what I still go back to over and over and over again. I didn't know how to eat right growing up as a kid. We had Eggo waffles, we had Pop-Tarts. I had more soda than you could ever imagine in your life. I don't think I had anything cooked real other than my grandmother probably once a week would cook something real. Everything else was a TV dinner and that. And at least in the 70s, TV dinners were almost real food, I'd say, compared to now. A TV dinner would probably beat most meals anywhere nowadays, even at a restaurant or anything. So I had that going for me. So it wasn't until I got my master's in nutrition that I found out, wow, eating actually makes a difference. It's a big deal. I told the story, I think, today to somebody. When I went through my classes for medical technology, we had our classes with med students, and we'd have them together, and then they would go do rounds. We'd have to go to the laboratory and do lab work. And we had a week-long nutrition class, and that's all we got, and that's all the med students got. And the thing that was talked about every day was basically the food pyramid and how to read a label and everything. But at the very last class, very last day, she put up the food pyramid, and over top the food pyramid, she put a piece of pizza, and then she put a Diet Coke next to it. And she says, so as long as you get this every day, you will get everything you need off the food pyramid, and you'll have everything you need. And it wasn't a joke. So that's what med students learned when I went through school. That was in the 90s. I went to get my master's in nutrition. In the very first class, Dr. Hilgardner started talking about what nutrition meant and what you had to put in your body and what it meant if you didn't put good stuff in and what bad stuff would do. And I went up to him afterwards and I said, if this is true, they would have taught this in med school. And he looked at me and says, I tell you what, just stay through the whole class, don't cause any problems, and when the class is all done, if you still have questions, you can take me out to lunch and I'll explain it all to you. We ended up becoming good friends, and he was right on a lot of things. So
Well, if you get people to do that and they start curing themselves, they no longer have any customers.
That's true. All my textbooks paid for through that medical technology program were paid for by Merck and by all the pharmaceutical companies. It was kind of interesting. They're good books, but they're missing information. So you want to have plenty of vegetables. Vegetables give you a lot of what's called coenzymes. Coenzymes are a little different than minerals, a little different than vitamins, and they can beat coenzymes. But a lot of times, if you put the right packaging of minerals and vitamins together, it makes a complex that does jobs in your body. It cleans out those ROS, those oxidative stress things in there. It basically makes things work better. It makes you absorb other vitamins. Fruits, fish, nuts, healthy oils support mitochondria. Avoid too much sugar and junk foods, and I could say seed oils there pretty easily. Yes, ma'am.
Could you just address artificial sweeteners?
Yeah. So artificial sweeteners are interesting in a lot of ways. I think I covered these when I talked about diabetes and that too. Artificial sweeteners, our bodies are not designed in any stretch of the imagination to use them. The second they hit our tongue, our body thinks sugar's on the way, so it produces a ton of insulin. Insulin sends a signal to mitochondria and makes it start trying to do jobs for the sugar that's coming, and it just wasted all of its time and energy because sugar is not coming. The next thing is our bodies cannot break down artificial sweeteners correctly. So our bodies are supposed to take in like fructose, things like that, take it to our liver, break them down, make them fat, then bring them back out as sugar. When we put an artificial sweetener in, it goes to our liver and it makes all kinds of chemicals that we can't break down. They get floating through our body, they go to the cell, they get in the mitochondria, and now we have the reactive oxidative stress and other things in there. So it's just a toxin that you're putting in. So no different than any other food preservative. That's really kind of what artificial sugars are. A sweet food preservative is what they are.
Even
Yes.
stevia.
Oh, stevia is interesting. Stevia is not quite the same, but in too much stevia causes a lot of the same things. I have a paper. I may have included it when I did the diabetes one, but I wrote a paper on artificial sweeteners and stevia in particular. I think were you here for that one? Sure. You have to ask Jennifer if that. Otherwise, we can copy off one of those papers. Yes, ma'am.
Like monk fruit and those.
So monk fruit and that they tend to work a little differently in the way your body breaks them down, but still there's a process of breaking it down that leaves toxins there. That's why it doesn't work out correctly. So that would be the same as your fructoses. So fructoses go in. They actually cause fatty liver disease if you get too much of them. We're not meant to have that much. We're supposed to eat fruit when it's in season, and that's it. If you start throwing it in as concentrate, you have the same thing as throwing in high fructose corn syrup. So yeah, good question. So exercise, it's use it or lose it. You make mitochondria based on the need for them. If you don't have need for them, it doesn't make them. So when I talked about one cell has 10 on it, if you exercise, you may make 15 or 20 in that cell next time. If you don't exercise, you make more. If you don't exercise, you're automatically, as you age, going to have less mitochondria. If you exercise, you can make more mitochondria. So it's very important to stay very active. Sleep, again, I talked about your body when you're sleeping doesn't have to make as much energy. It does a lot better job of cleaning out stuff and getting rid of sickness by sending those signals out. And so your body has to have sleep to make mitochondria work better. So the other thing is avoiding toxins. Heavy metals are a big one. Right now, we have a lot of our food has heavy metals in it. Our air has heavy metals in it. We use a lot of aerosol things in our house, like cleaners now. We didn't have necessarily the same kind of cleaners and the same kind of stuff that we use now. People have little things on their wall, air fresheners, that are going shh, shh, ever so often, spraying in their house all the time. Those most time have chemicals in it that are bad for you, whether it be heavy metals or other things, and that's the way it works. So avoiding pesticides and herbicides. I don't know why Roundup is not up there. That's my fault that Roundup is not up there. It's definitely one that interrupts it. Industrial chemicals, your PCP, your dioxins, trichloroethane, all these cause problems with mitochondria. So, and we're getting meaner chemicals than we had when I was a kid. You know, we worried about dioxin when we were a kid. We took it out of everywhere. We cleaned it up. There's waste sites around the country. But we've actually made some stuff that's probably worse than that gets into our body faster and causes long-term damage. We have what's called forever chemicals now. So a lot of chemicals break down, they go away. Maybe it takes 10, 20, 30 years and they break down. We have chemicals now that are forever. They do not break down, they do not go away. So those are the scary ones out there. Air pollutions. So particulate matter, this is kind of what, when the World Trade Center went down and all that dust that came out of there, that's kind of what that is. And a lot of health problems came after that, a lot of fatigue issues, a lot of immune issues. And so that's what it was. Ozone. Ozone's an interesting one. Ozone in mild doses is actually beneficial. It's beneficial to us, it's beneficial to plants, and that there are some ozone treatments that can do. It's when you get exposed to a lot of ozone that it's actually caustic to your cells and your mitochondria. Carbon monoxide is definitely a problem. Carbon monoxide goes into your tissues and it sticks to it and basically makes a super rust inside your mitochondria. So if you're exposed to carbon monoxide, it's a big deal. I had a patient who had done his genetic work and he had three of the MT genes that were bad for mitochondria. Good guy, young athlete, smart guy. He went to work in the summertime doing concrete work. Well, he ended up, they had in the late summer, they had a really cold day and they were pouring a concrete floor in a basement. So they brought in a propane heater and put it on blowing in like one of the jet heaters, and everything was closed up with plastic. He got carbon monoxide poison, and it took us probably about a year and a half before he was back in college again and doing the things he needed to do. So, I mean, he took a hit on that one. So it can be, even just having little carbon monoxide poisoning, not enough to knock you out, can be a problem. Hydrogen sulfide, we see this more like coal burning type stuff, but there's a lot of chemicals that produce. So some of the household chemicals will produce this. And then your PAHs, these are, sometimes we get a lot of these when we're burning stuff. We don't realize it when you're burning plastics, you're burning things like that. Also some household chemicals and things. This is kind of a big one. I didn't put ivermectin up here. There were some studies that showed ivermectin probably should have been placed in this one too, but it didn't quite fall in the same criteria. So there's a number of pharmaceutical antiviral drugs for HIV in particular that cause major mitochondrial issues. The catch is during COVID, a lot of doctors try to use a lot of these to kill viral infections, and so probably cause some individuals some problems. And they're being used more for different things. So that's significant. On a note, I read an article sometime back that people with HIV are actually outliving regular everyday individuals. So the life expectancy for somebody without HIV now has dropped to like 76, 77. And for people with HIV that are being treated, now it's like 79, 80 years old. So it's kind of a crazy, interesting thing. But most of them are eating healthier. Most of them are taking care of the problems that we're talking about. So pharmaceutical things that cause problems. Chemotherapy drugs. We already hit on this a little bit. Chemotherapy drugs, their point is to kill bad cells. And so whenever you're killing bad cells, at some point those bad cells die and all those chemicals are still in you. They have to be cleaned up. The job to being cleaned up goes to the mitochondria. And so they go into the mitochondria and they try to clean them up. They try to get rid of them the best they can. They do clean up some of them stay in them, and they just keep passing it on and on and on. So, but on the other hand, there's times when you have to have chemotherapy. I wouldn't say I'm not doing chemotherapy because my mitochondria don't like it. If you need chemotherapy, that's the time. If we can do anything else other than that, that's great. Anticonvulsants. So these are interesting ones. They give anticonvulsants to keep you from having seizures, but if your mitochondria aren't working correctly, you have more seizures. So that's an interesting one. You'll see somebody that goes on an anticonvulsant, anti-seizure medication, and they're good for 10, 15 years. And then all of a sudden it stops working. It's because the mitochondria got full and couldn't clean it out anymore. So then they put them on a second one, and maybe they're good for another 2 years, 3 years, and then all of a sudden it stops working. And that's kind of one of the things that happens with anticonvulsants. Statin drugs. The reason statin drugs are a problem, your mitochondria need CoQ10. There's cholesterol, it comes down, it makes your hormones, it makes CoQ10. When you go on a statin drug, you cut back your cholesterol, you can't make CoQ10, your mitochondria can't work right, and you end up having more heart disease because you start having problems there. So it's kind of a catch-22. If there's people I tell to go on statin drugs, if you're not going to change your diet, you're not going to clean up anything, you're not going to do anything, and your cholesterol is running at 300, well, you better take a statin drug because it's going to stick. If you can do the things to keep it from sticking, then you probably don't need the cholesterol medication. Again, your acetaminophen, your NSAIDs, your things like that are bad for mitochondria. There's times when you have pain and you go take something for a couple days, maybe a week, but if you're taking something every single day, we ought to figure out some other way to take care of that, some way to get down that inflammation, make it feel better. Anti-diabetic drugs, metformin is one of the big ones, and they use metformin a lot, and that's what you'll have people come and say, nope, I'm on metformin, I'm not diabetic anymore. Well, that's interesting. Metformin had some interesting studies done a while back that said people on metformin live longer. That was the thing. It helps with cells, it helps with telomeres, it does some things like that. The catch is most of those studies were done on sick people, kind of the same way they do with cholesterol medications. They take somebody that has major heart problems, put some of them on cholesterol and some of them not. Well, they didn't change their diet, they didn't do anything else. They say, well, hey, the one that had cholesterol medication lived longer. Well, the sick people that were diabetics that didn't take metformin didn't go as long because they didn't change anything. But they've never taken metformin and really said, hey, let's see what it does in a really healthy person and see if they live longer. The studies that are out there are kind of all in vitro, which means they're kind of test tube done for the healthy people. And they believe that it doesn't help healthy people live longer. So, and it causes mitochondrial issues, so we can kind of deduct from that metformin is probably not going to help you live longer in general if you're a healthy person. Basically, things for tachycardia, antiarrhythmetics, there's a couple of them. I don't remember the other one that makes a difference too, but there's a couple of them out there that cause problems. And then down on others, lidocaine, ethanol, which is alcohol, It causes major problems with mitochondria. A little bit of it can help out, but a lot of it causes a problem. Interferons are types of medications used a lot of times in different inflammatory things to help bring down inflammation. Bisphosphonates, all these antipsychotic medications. So a lot of your psych meds will cause a problem with mitochondria. They build up over time. So you'll have individuals. Some people need psych meds, so don't let me distract from that. But some people need them just because their genetics need them. Things happen in their life, they need them. But in general, most people that you see go on a psych med, they may be better for a short-term period, maybe 2 years, 5 years, 6 years. But in long term, they begin to have problems. I have one person in mind, a family member, that has been on psych meds for 30 years or so, and now they have seizures. And that's about the only thing I can come up with is the reason they're having seizures is because they were on those psych meds for so long. And, we probably drove them crazy as kids, and they probably need it. After us kids moved out, they probably shouldn't have needed it anymore. But no one ever addresses that. No one ever comes back and says, hey, are you doing better now? You had that stressful time in your life. You had that bad things happen. And do you think maybe now we can come back and maybe lower that down? No doctor I've ever seen has ever said that one time to anybody. So another one, we want to avoid toxins. The microplastics, I still probably have a problem with microplastics. I would much prefer to drink water bottle and carry around a plastic water bottle, drink the water, throw it away, than I do it. But that's the only way I get water in. So I have my own faults. But getting away from plastics, getting more to glasses and metals are a thing. The nanomaterials are becoming more prevalent. And I included one up here, the silver nanoparticles. I've used nano silver a number of times, but we're talking about people that are drinking it by the gallon every day. Drinking a lot of it can start causing problems. A little bit is not a problem, but I had a friend who used to make his own, use colloidal silver, make his own colloidal silver, and he was taking in a ton of it every day. He was actually had a little blue tint to him. He wasn't all the way blue like a Smurf like some people get. This is where we have cyanide. So you asked about cyanide. Cyanide is interesting. One of the places that people get cyanide is with cyanocobalamin. Cyanocobalamin is cyanide B12. That's what it is. And I can't tell you, probably multiple times in a week, probably 5-6 times in a week, I'm reviewing somebody's supplements. And they will say, oh no, I'm taking B12. I'm taking B12. I've studied, I know I need B12, I'm taking it. Okay, what do you take? I'm taking Nature's Made, or hey, my doctor prescribed me B12. So if you go to the pharmacy and you go to get B12 that is prescribed, especially if Medicare pays for it, they are giving you cyanocobalamin. And for your body to use it correctly, it has to pull off the cyano group, which is a cyanide group. And now you have B12. It has to go around in your body and try to find a methyl group to fasten to it so it can go take it to the mitochondria so they work. When you are taking B12 and you need it to work properly, you need to take methylcobalamin, methyl B12. And if you don't, you're going to be causing mitochondrial problems. You're going to be having problems. The catch is cyanocobalamin is a waste product of, it's a refined mineral. It's a waste product. It's super cheap. They try to get rid of it. It's a way for them to even take cyanide sometimes, stick it to cobalamin so they don't have to pay to get rid of the cyanide. So you can get rid of cyanide by sticking it to cobalamin and sell it to people, and they think they're getting a really good product, and you're actually making them sick. And so the medical world pays for it. It's cheap. Insurance pays for it. It causes you problems. So it's not a good deal. Malonate. Malonate is another chemical out there it's probably in some of our food preservatives and things like that. Anamycin, if I remember correctly, that is a byproduct of, it's a mycotox. I think it comes from some of your fungus and things like that. So it's a mycotoxin there. And then the MPTP, this is one that causes mitochondrial issues in the neurons and that kind of thing. So now, also how we can help you away. If you have an infection, take care of it. Clean it up. Get rid of the infection. If your body's not doing it in a timely manner, if we're out past that week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, and we're still having an infection, we ought to get it cleaned up before it becomes a chronic infection and have problems. Bacterial infections are some of those that individuals will go and get a chest cold and go around for 2 months and let that simmer in there. And that's not a good thing. Get it cleaned up, especially if you're older. It's going to cause scarring and issues like that. Viruses. I get a number of individuals in that I look at their blood work, and we see lymphocytes in their blood work, they're elevated, or monocytes in the blood work are elevated. Typically, when you see those two things elevated, they're fighting off a virus. And so we need to do some herbal treatments, some homeopathic treatments, maybe even send them to the doctor to get some bicyclovir or something like that to help clean up these viral infections, because they will basically cause a lot of oxidative stress. That's why COVID was so rough on people. Parasites. So interesting enough, there's a dichotomy between the medical world and the holistic functional world when we talk about parasites. And so if you go into a hospital, if you go to see a medical doctor and you say, "Doctor, can you check me for parasites?" They're like, "Well, I don't think you have any, but we'll go ahead and run a stool test." They are looking for worms. They're looking for Giardia. They're looking for that kind of thing. If you talk to a functional doctor, or if you're watching YouTube and Facebook right now and they talk about parasites, they're talking about viruses, parasites, and funguses. That's what they're talking about when they talk about parasites. So if you go into your medical doctor and say, "Hey, what do you think about this protocol for taking care of parasites?" They're going to be like, "Are you crazy?" Because they don't think fungus is a parasite. They don't think that thing. So I tend to call them what they are. I tend to say you have a virus, or you have a parasite, or you have fungus, because then we narrow it down. So I had a lady in asking me today, "Can you do blood work for parasites?" I said, "No, we need to get clearer. What are we talking about parasites?" And she was wanting to know actually fungus is what she was wanting to know. How can we keep them healthy? So use supplements wisely. You know, a lot of people think they're doing good. They're going out and they're getting the cyanocobalamin. They're getting vitamin D without K2. They're doing things like that, and they're missing the point of what you got to do to keep mitochondria healthy. So making sure you have deficiencies. So when you come in for an exam with me, I do some crazy things. I look at your tongue. I think I had 2 patients in this week that said, "I've never had anybody look at my tongue and talk about my tongue before." And, you know, they had a geographic tongue that was all splotchy. It had white stains on it, had cracks in it. I said, "Yeah, we got problems here. We have a fungal problem and we have a B12 problem." And so looking at those kind of things, doing some testing, looking at, most people have never had anybody look at their blood work, sit in the room with them and say, "Yeah, I'm looking through your blood work, and it looks like right here your red blood cells are too large and they don't have enough iron in them. So we probably need to get you some iron, or we need to test that to see where your iron is," that kind of stuff. So when you look properly at the evidence that's in front of you, a lot of times you can see these deficiencies, but there's still people sometimes that you can't tell what they have. And so we test at that point. We come back and see if you have deficiencies or excesses, and then we support appropriately. So your CoQ10, your alpha lipoic acid, your B12s make a big difference for mitochondrial health. So this is a program that I am working on. I'm putting this together, and partially because of doing all the research. It took me, this is about 2 months to put this program together tonight. And I started realizing I had a large deficit in my detoxification program to help people out. I haven't been doing good enough. I didn't know I wasn't doing good enough. So I have quadrupled down on my education on it to put this together. So I've come with a new plan. It's called the Restore Protocol. And the first one is we want to take a good interview process and start asking questions of, "Hey, what have you been exposed to in your life? Have you been exposed to the mold? Have you been exposed to these heavy metals? Was your dad a welder and held you every night when you got home from doing that?" You know, that kind of stuff. Were you a farmer? I used to drive the tractor, spraying Roundup, and I'd have a bologna sandwich in one hand, a Mountain Dew in the other hand, driving with my knee on the steering wheel, go down, turn around the field, and the dust would be blowing up from the Roundup, and it would fall on me, and you could taste it on your lips. It actually has an interesting, good taste. It goes really good with the bologna sandwich. And so I can't tell you probably how much of it I've eaten, but we do an interview process and start figuring out those things. We do the exam that I do, which is a little bit of a medical exam, a little bit of a functional medicine exam, and then fall off in the Eastern medicine side. And we start looking for those things, and then we test. Hey, yeah, you just told me that you've been exposed to mold, you've had black spot in your bathroom for 10 years, and you scrape some off and everything, but you do that every month when you clean the bathroom. You're probably inhaling it, and now your tongue's white, and you're having all these problems. Maybe we test for microtox. So that's the kind of program we're looking at. After we figure out what it is, we eliminate it. We clean it up, we get rid of it, and then we bind it. After we do that, we try to strengthen back up the cell. So that alpha lipoic acid, that CoQ10, we give you those things to start strengthening back up the mitochondria. We kind of supercharge them, get them moving in the right direction. Then we try to stop any inflammation. So once we clean that up, a lot of times your body will throw those toxins out of the mitochondria and it begins to inflame. So you're like, Dr. Thoma, I came to you to get better and now I'm swollen up. Well, we pull those toxins out of that mitochondria, we get them out of your system. We got to get them cleaned up and get rid of them. So we're going to change that diet. We're going to avoid sugar. We're going to start doing some binders and things to help them out there. We talked about DNA. So we want to reprogram the code. The DNA is what we talk about, the epigenetics. The switches, some switches have been turned on. Maybe things aren't working right. Maybe you just think it's getting older. We try to come back and do things to turn off those switches. And if we know your exact DNA, when we do a DNA profile on individuals, we can come back and say, hey, you need more L-carnitine, you need more creatine, you need something like this to clean it up. A lot of times those broken MT genes need something to make them work properly. I talked about mine being ribose. I put in ribose, and all of a sudden I'm thinking, yeah, I feel 10 years younger, which is nice.
What is this ribose?
Ribose is a protein, basically, that helps produce DNA, particularly, is what it is. So it's not one I've ever, not ever. It's not one that it's one that I rarely give people. But when I do that gene, the genetic study, and you have those, I come back and say, what supplementation helps this gene turn off or turn on, depending which. So some genes are supposed to be on an on state, some are supposed to be in an off state, or some are supposed to be neutral. And my gene for my mitochondria was basically turned in an off state, and I needed to turn it back on. And ribose is what turned it on.
So did you just take it a while and then?
I'm still taking it. I take a low dose. I don't do any. I'm sensitive. I'm a sensitive fella, so I tend to not need as much as other people do, and so I take just a little bit every day. Is what I do.
Recommend just we sell it here.
Probably not. Probably not. It's usually that. If any, I know I have patients in here who've done it, but if you get the opportunity, almost every holiday, Ancestry DNA puts the Ancestry DNA on sale for $39. If you do that, basically after you've spit in the cup, you send it off. You can choose whether to share your information with the world or you can keep it to yourself. I always say in a couple of weeks you'll get back what monkeys you're related to. So you can choose your information to share or keep it to yourself. And then at the top you can go to settings and you can download your raw DNA file. It's a zip file. If you open it, you can't read it at all. It's just jumbled up stuff. And we take and analyze that, and I make up a report for you. And I will say that report is getting better every month. I'm getting it refined down where maybe this month I'm studying these genes and I figure out exactly how they work, and so I get good information. Next month it's getting a little better, a little better. I've been doing that now for about 6 years. And so what I'm getting out now is good. I would say in another 6 years, what I'm doing now will be less than adequate for what I'm doing then. It's just I'm getting better at it all the time. But I don't think there's been a person who I've done it on, even back years ago, that didn't get something that helped their world out. Because we check out all the methylation genes, we know you need more B12 than the average person. You need more D than the average person. You need L-carnitine, and your genes are broken. So if you don't do it, they stay broken the rest of your life. And so if you start taking that at low dose, gene's not going to change, but you take it, you just take it at low dose the rest of your life, and you fix problems. So that's why that's important. If you're a patient, haven't done it, or if you're planning on being a patient someday, look at it. It'll go on sale sometime. It's usually almost every 3 weeks, but it's almost every holiday. The next one's going to be, it's Memorial Day, right? The next holiday? So Labor Day. I always get the two backwards. It'll be Labor Day unless there is some crazy holiday that's on your calendar. They will put a sale up for it, I'm sure. We just had a nice one for 4th of July. So that's something to think about. And then reinforce or enforce the regeneration, making your cells whole and new. So getting out, getting that activity. Intermittent fasting a lot of times gives your mitochondria just a chance to clean out. And so even on a daily basis, putting your meals in an 8-hour period basically makes it so that you have 16 hours of basically your mitochondria not having to process stuff. They're cleaning up, they're doing the jobs with your immune system. You get people who are getting up in the morning, they're eating early in the morning time, they're snacking all day long, then they have to have their popcorn or ice cream before they go to bed at nighttime, and basically they're getting 8 hours of not eating. You're better off getting 8 hours of eating in, and that's your window, and 16 hours of not eating. That makes a difference there. Ketogenic diets are good. Paleo diets are good. Anti-inflammatory diets are good. I kind of mix those up depending on how the food sensitivities people have and what they need. If you're a patient and never have received a nutrition plan from me, that's something we can talk about. Focus on deep sleep. So, stop looking at your iPad in the evening time. If you're having a problem and you're sitting there looking at your iPad, and say, okay, I'm going to go to sleep. You lay the iPad, and now you're like, well, now I'm awake. Stop looking at your iPad. That screen, when you're looking at it, is blinking like this. The whole time you're looking at it, it's wiring your brain up. It's exciting you. Take and read a book. Read a piece of paper and go to sleep that way. So find a time in the evening time, shut that down, shut off the lights, cool your bedroom down. Those things help mitochondria out. Just relaxation. Going for a walk and just looking around at the flowers come through the sidewalk, the grass, the trees, takes down that anxiety, takes down that stress, helps your nervous system recover, helps those mitochondria clean out. And that's what we do. In conclusion, mitochondria are tiny, but I should have just put very, 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 very important for your energy and health. You can help them by eating well, moving your body, getting enough sleep. That's the 3 big things. And I probably should have put watching what you're exposed to. Watching really what's exposed to. There's times where, you're standing there at Walmart waiting to cross the road and the diesel truck's sitting there running in front of you and you're sitting there inhaling the fumes. You probably take a step or 2 back. It's probably an important thing to do. And then I am working on this Restore program. I would say my goal is by the end of October to really have this. And I'll probably talk about it again. So I probably may have a whole a talk on it sometime. Like, hey, what do we do to clean up the mitochondria? What do we do to really be healthy and work for longevity? I think that'll probably be a talk coming up this fall for sure. And then if you enjoyed this, the best thing you can ever do to help pay me back is go on Google and leave me a Google review. Say, hey, I was there. Dr. Thoma talked about this and I enjoyed it. And that helps me out. That's a nice way to pay me back. I probably spend 100 hours in producing this and taking my time to do it. And then the books in the end cost me probably about $4 to produce the books a piece. So if you have the time, if you see fit, go give me some good stars. If you didn't like it, well, never mind. It'll be okay. I refer tonight to several different talks that I've done. If you go to thelegacyclinic.com, which is our website, you can go up to the top. There's a video library. It takes you to my YouTube channel. You may have to go down a couple things. There's seminars on there, and all the seminars are there. And the good thing is, if you're bored, you can put it in fast forward and go through it faster. So, and then if you're needing help, or if you're a patient and something came up tonight and you want to talk about something, come see me. We'll step it up to the next level. If you're not a patient, I think anybody who has been a patient will say one thing about it: I care. I care about you. Just like I do my own family. So if there's anything I can do for you, let us know, and we'll go from there. I think that's the last slide.